Good morning, Hardus.
Morning, Ava. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks.
It's very good to meet you.
Same your side. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
I'd imagine you're becoming a very busy man.
Yeah, listen, it's been a year. I can't lie.
Look, this is great. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I'm just waiting for everybody else to join, and then we'll move forward.
Cool, no problem at all. I'm just going to switch off my camera until everybody's in, and then we'll chat now.
Thank you. David, I see you've joined us. Is it Manuel David or David Manuel?
It's Manuel David, but I think only SAPS calls me that. Call me Manny, please. Manny for short. Yeah.
How's it, Manny? I'm Ivor.
How's
Look,
it? How's it?
Manny, where are you from?
So I'm from Massmart. I'm in the Builders Warehouse
Oh,
division.
lovely. Fantastic. I'm so happy you're on board. Thank you
Yeah,
so
and I,
much.
I run the special categories for the commercial department nationally. Paint is one of the categories that I look after.
The special needs categories.
Yeah. You've obviously met my staff before. I shouldn't say
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, look, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to have all of you guys here. We've got the Paint Club in Gary's presence. Gary, thank you so much for joining us. Uh, we've got Manny from Massmart. We've got Hardis from Build It, and Jaco Hutting is now about to join us. There we go. That's fantastic.
Just Ivor, I don't know why I got this blank screen. I don't usually use, let me just see again, open
Now, Gary, you can just put off your
camera.
video if you want. Yeah, it's not the end of the
Okay,
world.
okay, cool.
I've seen
There we
you. I know what you look like. I know where you live. Anything goes wrong, we'll find you.
Good.
Uh, Tara was there. Tara was there. I'm just waiting for her to join us again, and we'll be able to get going. Yako, good morning.
Jacker's on mute.
Yeah. Morning, Tara. All right. Guys, it is 10. I'm just giving it 2 more minutes. Let me just see. We've got Paint Club. We've got Micah. We've got Builders. We've got Build It. So we're making good progress here. You know what? I'm recording in any event, so I don't want to waste your time. I just want to share a screen. Right. There we go. And there we go. And right. I hope everybody can see my screen. So thank you all for joining us. And I really don't want to take up too much of your time. I know how busy all of you are. Um, we're talking this morning about the opportunity to create the South African Association for Paint and Hardware, which is something that we canvassed about 2 years ago, but has become more and more prominent in terms of the need for it. Jaco, I hope you don't mind, but you wrote me a very comprehensive note, and I just want to quote from your note to begin with. Our industry is coming under increasing pressure from informal and unregulated traders in the hardware, paint, and building materials sector. Our stores are having to compete against unregistered traders selling non-SABS, cheap and poor quality imported products. And with the consumers under financial pressure, it is starting to affect our trade. Most, if not all of these stores are run by Chinese, Pakistani, or other foreign nationals, are unregistered businesses not complying with tax law, the Companies Act, and other regulations. Similar to what is currently taking place with spaza shops, etc., there might be a call to start regulating these traders in our industry as well. I'm not sure if there is a need from our reputable competitors, but we would certainly get behind an initiative to better control our industry. If this is something you would want to investigate and get involved with, we would be very happy to have a conversation, etc. So before I move forward in my presentation to you, I just wanted to get an idea from those around the table. And here we've got the Paint Club, we've got Builders, we've got Build It, and we've got Micah with us. And we are just being joined now by one other person, but I wanted to get an idea from you whether you all share these sentiments or whether you have differing views. I want this to be an informal discussion leading up to, on the 18th of this month, we have our retail chamber forum meeting. So I'd like to see if, morning, Stephen. I'd like to see if we are in agreement that something needs to be done. Because like I say, about 2 years ago, we did canvass this amongst the retailers, but for whatever reason, it wasn't a priority 2 years ago. But it seems now that it has become a priority. And so for that reason, I'd like to just get an indication whether you agree with the fact that it is a priority. Gary, I see that your microphone is unmuted. Maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, morning, everybody. We don't really face the same challenges as Micah would. I mean, we are mostly paint and hardware. Some of the bigger hardware groups may see this in the rural markets, where they compete directly with stores of this nature, where they've got imported products, and obviously their prices are a lot more aggressive than ours from, when you look at building materials and hardware. But the paint industry we compete in and the market we compete in, we don't see this as a challenge or a threat at this point in time. But it is, and I think, like Jaco has mentioned, is if it's not regulated and we don't put pressure on the necessary bodies, this could become more and more unregulated and then start affecting businesses in what I would call the more formal trade, especially in the paint industry.
Thanks, Gary. What's interesting is 2 years ago when you and I mooted the idea of this opportunity to create this association, and in fact, we did a name reservation on the association at that time as well. It was specifically to be able to lobby for a fair trading field, a fair trading environment amongst, let's call them, emerging and survivalist businesses, as opposed to the more traditional, which are the chain businesses and also independent retail stores out there. It seems to me it's become more of a complex trading environment. And I must be honest, I think that one of the gateways into South Africa is very specifically the African Free Trade Agreement, which allows for an unfair trading environment to persist in South Africa, or at least to be initiated in South Africa, and hence the need. In my presentation that I will do once everybody's had a chance just to give their opening thoughts, but in my presentation, I do talk about the need for lobbying. I talk about the mechanism for lobbying as well. We are very fortunate in the sense that SAPHA sits on Business Unity South Africa, and Business Unity South Africa represents the entire business community at NEDLAC, which is the National Economic Development and Labour Council. And so in that respect, has carte blanche to influence NEDLAC through BUSA. And we'd want this association to in fact have the same channels that, for example, the Surface Coating Association, which is also run under SAPMA, and therefore has access to BUSA and has access to NEDLAC, and through NEDLAC, by the way, the Parliamentary Portfolio Committees, where policy is in fact finalized before it goes to Parliament. So I hear exactly what you're saying, Gary. It might be a the current crisis might be a rural thing rather than necessarily an urban thing. Although I must say, in urban environments, I have seen, let's call them pop-up stores, selling paint and retail hardware as well. I don't necessarily believe it's only restricted to rural areas, but you might, within the paint club, Gary, have more of a hold on it than because you have a limited number of members, as opposed to, for argument's sake, the Buildits of this world, or the Builders Warehouses, or Mica. But thank you for that comment. I really do appreciate it. Any other comments before I carry on about the need for this?
If I may, it's Yaku. I think it started out in the rural and smaller towns, but there's certainly been an increase in, like you said, pop-ups especially in CBDs. A lot of our stores are still in sort of central business districts, and we've seen these stores pop up there. And also these, for lack of a better, they call it themselves, these China malls, selling, tools and even paint. And I agree with Gary. We haven't seen it as much in paint, but a lot of Gary's members are also, in the building game, like the Timballs and those guys. And they'll certainly also feel, the pressure coming from these stores. So it's definitely moving into more urban areas. And I think that's why the need sort of increased in recent times.
Hardus, from your perspective at Build It, what is your view, sir?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a lot more cited within the rural market, but I also don't believe it's only limited to paint as well. So I definitely feel there is a need for an association like this, because we see them being the independent traders. They're growing from strength to strength over multiple categories. It's not just in paint per se, but in the building materials and tools aspect, they're growing quite decently in strength, and therefore poses an impact if, like you said earlier on, the fair trade market isn't regulated. I think they'll grow where they eventually are starting to play within this paint space. So I think it's also best to tame the beast before it gets too big.
Good. Manny, if I can ask you for your comment, and then I'll move back to my presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Morning, guys. It's Manny here from Builders Massmart. So, whether there's an increase or not an increase on it, I think that regulation is essential anyway. Otherwise, we just open up doors that should never have been opened. I think similarly to IOPSA and ICASA and NBA and the regulatory boards and what they've been trying to do over the years, the paint industry certainly needs a regulatory board. And I would certainly suggest that from the merchants and independents and retailers side, I think we only got a big enough hand to do X amount, and it's quite limited. I would certainly suggest that the manufacturers, like your Dulux and Plascons, etc., are fully integrated and fully involved in this. And we as the retailers are basically the backup for them. But that's just my opinion on it.
So, Manny,
Thank you.
that's a very interesting point you just mentioned, because, again, 2 years ago, it was the manufacturers and the suppliers who actually supported the notion of a independent retail and hardware association under the auspices of SAPHA, within the umbrella of SAPHA, just like the Surface Coating Employer Association is under the umbrella of SAPHA, only because of economies of scale. The idea that you can have your SAPMA office supporting the operational activities, and then from a lobbying perspective, industry specific, retailer specific would then sit in the various BUSA structures which are affected, and also obviously at NEDLAC as well, which is where it's the sexy place of negotiation on best policy. We're very concerned. We have been very concerned, and Tara, maybe you want to say something about this again before I go back to my presentation, but we've been very concerned about the fact that whereas up until now finished goods have not been dealt with in terms of the African Free Trade Agreement, they are now on the schedule for the African Free Trade Agreement, and they're spiraling from a 10% duty all the way down to 0 rated, which means that your competitors, or rather from a supply point of view, what's happening is, let's just take for argument's sake, and I have no facts to back this up at this moment in time, but let's say, for example, China is dumping product into South Africa, and then through its unregulated retail network is actually distributing those products into South Africa. It becomes an unfair trading ground. So the African Free Trade Agreement is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it may mean that cheaper product comes into South Africa because of the reduction in tariffs. But on the other hand, you can be certain that it's intended not for distribution in the formal retail market, but certainly for the creation of an informal or independent operator market. And as Jaco has said in the opening comments that I quoted, we all know where those markets are generally situated. So it is something that at the moment is not regulated. And I am firmly of the opinion that it needs to be regulated. Tara, do you want to say something about this finished goods story?
Yes, thanks, Iva, and good morning to everyone. So with regards to the finished product, Chapter 32, as you mentioned, it is included now in the African Free Trade Agreement for over a 5 or 10-year period to be downscaled to a 0 rating. The only way I believe at the moment we can assist with that is in terms of regulations that have been passed. So, for instance, the lead in paint regulation, all of that paint is going to be, the finished product is going to be tested at the ports of entry, and there are only, I think, 3 or 4 ports of entry that are listed that they will receive those products. So, and in the meantime, it's only the lead in paint regulation that will be able to help us filter out those Chinese imports at this stage. But as you say, to be regulated further, I think it's crucial that we start working on that now.
Okay, so moving on then in terms of the presentation, in 2023, we made the following presentation. The paint and hardware retail sector constituting the largest industry-based group of companies trading in South Africa in the retail space. Dominance underscores the critical need for unified standards, ensuring the sector's sustainability, compliance, and alignment with national economic goals. I must tell you that sitting on BUSA, it is apparent to me that if we can create a South African Paint and Hardware Association just of the groups which are on today's call, and there are many others who are not on the call today, but just of the group which is on today's call, we would have the 3rd largest business association sitting at BUSA, and therefore moving through to NEDLAC, which is where all the regulations and self-governing mechanisms that we'd want to implement would in fact be debated and negotiated. So we proposed the establishment of the South African Paint and Hardware Association, aiming to unify stakeholders, ensuring that retail stores operate within a framework of compliance and accountability. We are allowed to do that. We are allowed to self-govern. It doesn't amount to collusion, because all we're doing is establishing standards, and then we are measuring our members against compliance with those standards. But at the same time, we're establishing a register of questionable businesses operating, which then allow us to go after those businesses in terms of forcing them into a mechanism of compliance. And there is absolutely nothing in the African Free Trade Agreement, there is nothing in current legislation in South Africa that says that if you're operating as a retailer in South Africa, you are somehow neutral, you are somehow exempt from having to comply with all of the registration of a business requirements, all of the compliance reporting of a business, no matter how big or how small. And importantly, in terms of the product that you actually sell into the marketplace, remember that SAPHA has an agreement with the Office for Consumer Goods and Services. And that agreement says that we will endeavor to make sure that our members within SAPHA, and in this respect, the Surface Coating Employer Association as an extension, and hopefully the South African Paint and Hardware Association as an extension, that our members are compliant with those requirements, because there is a law that says every single retailer by law has to be registered with the Office for Consumer Goods and Services. And I can guarantee you that the vast majority of the businesses you're talking about are not registered with the Office for Consumer Goods and Services. The South African Paint and Hardware Association would focus on certifying compliance stores, addressing non-compliance, and creating a sustainable, fair, and consumer-centric market. And through a collaboration with SAPHA, the initiative will also ensure enhanced quality guarantees for paint and coating product, reinforcing consumer confidence. Our manufacturing members within SAPMA are saying this, that if you take a tin of white paint, the moment you open that tin of white paint for purposes of tinting, you actually affect the guarantee of that tin of white paint. So we've come to a compromise with our manufacturers that say that if the store is actually certified that the people who are doing the tinting, we call them mixologists. We can change the term. It's really your term. If those individuals are then certified and have a designation from the professional body within SAPMA, then automatically whatever guarantee is on the bucket is a guarantee that will be in force, in full force and effect. So that's quite an interesting aspect, because what it does mean for those unregulated stores or those stores not compliant is that they immediately lose the guarantees on their products the moment those tins are opened. So the objectives of the South African Paint and Hardware Association, as I've said, certified compliance, developing a certification system for retail stores, adhering to South African laws, regulations, and industry standards. And this doesn't have to be bureaucratic. It doesn't have to be laborious. Certify stores that comply with these requirements, offering consumers a reliable benchmark of trust and safety. Addressing non-compliance, identifying and taking action against non-compliant retail stores, engaging in unfair trade practices where they might compromise consumer safety. We are about now to look at the issue of methanol in the manufacturing process, now that we've dealt with lead. And obviously methanol is a completely unregulated product in the manufacturing of paint and other hardware products. We've been drawn into the process of beginning the activities around methanol. In terms of addressing non-compliance, maintaining a register of non-compliant stores and ensuring appropriate legal action when necessary. That's with the Department of Labor in terms of employment standards in those businesses. It's also with the Department of Health in terms of all of the regulations and compliance requirements. And that's, of course, not forgetting SARS and National Treasury as well. Promoting industry collaboration. Establishing this MOU with SAPMA to guarantee extended warranties on compliant paint and coatings products, promoting consumer trust in certified stores, but also in being consistent with our MOU with the Office for Consumer Goods and Services, making sure that we bring to the public's knowledge that if you deal with a certified store, everything including your guarantees are in place. If you don't, then you truly are on your own. And under promoting industry collaboration, facilitate collaboration between retailers and manufacturers, because we want to enhance product quality and ensure adherence to these industry standards. Now, the next bullet point is a very important bullet point that I've already alluded to, and that is to represent the interests of the paint and hardware sector through SAPMA at Business Unity South Africa and the National Economic Development and Labour Council, where we advocate for policies, practices to be recognized that promote fairness, compliance, and growth in our retail sector. Very big objective of SAPHA would have to be consumer awareness of what it is we stand for, what our stores who are certified as excellent stand for, where we highlight the importance of purchasing from compliant stores to mitigate health and safety risks. And then obviously I've got a section there on sustainability, ensure the effective administration of SAPHA's affairs, including regular meetings, engagements, and operational oversight. And to allocate, now this is important, if we are going to move into the realm of creating SAPHA, it's also going to be because we allocate resources amongst ourselves for legal fees to address non-compliance issues, ensuring accountability and fair competition. Like in marketing, they talk about above the line marketing costs and below the line marketing costs, where above the line is advertising spend and below the line is where you get free advertising because you're publishing thought leadership articles, etc., etc. So it's the same within the legal fraternity or within the legal provision of when you create an association such as this, where in fact the above the line are legal fees you may have to pay, but below the line are initiating activities through your existing legal enforcement mechanisms. And you might have heard that the Department of Employment and Labour are in the process now of employing another 3,000 labour inspectors to blitz non-compliant businesses. And as you know, there's a significant amount of compliance requirements even for small businesses. And I can assure you that the vast majority of the businesses you're referring to in your note to me, Jaco, are not compliant in terms of employment standards. And that's ignoring Department of Trade and Industry standards, Department of Health standards, etc., etc. The key deliverables of the structure we're talking about creating would be a certification framework, would be a public marketing campaign, would be industry representation. So when I say that we have, through SAPMA, we sit on BUSA, I'm actually saying you, the retail sector, would sit on BUSA. You would be the individuals who sit as subject matter experts in those various structures of BUSA, and therefore NEDLAC, and therefore the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. There is really no other way to build an impactful association than the one I'm actually covering with you today. There's no other way of doing it. If you cannot get to BUSA, and through BUSA to NEDLAC, and through NEDLAC to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committees, you cannot affect change in terms of legislation, and you cannot enact any protection mechanisms, which are not a dirty word. It's not a dirty concept to say we want our industry protected, but you have to lobby for that protection. Because remember, and you have to bear this in mind, our government has a debt of gratitude to the rest of Africa that it is currently paying back because of what's gone on historically by opening the South African market under the African Free Trade Agreement and also by the immigration relaxations on immigration into South Africa of businesses to actually open the South African retail market up to the rest of Africa. And as the operators in South Africa, I would imagine you're saying so far and no further until we have our act in order, until we're assured that there is a level playing field. We're not going to agree to new retailers coming in from Egypt, to new retailers coming in from Iran, from Brazil, from Russia to play in our market spaces when in fact we as an industry that are paying tax in this country are actually being undermined in the process. And hence the need for that industry representation on these structures, but forceful industry representation on these structures. And I know you're going to say to me, but hold on a moment, we're retailers, we are so busy, and I know that. But if you don't take care of your trading framework, of your trading platform, then before you know it, you'll be faced with a whole series of unwanted structures which are being imposed upon us. They're already talking in the equivalent of the European Parliament, but in Africa, they're already talking in the African Parliament about the fact that there should be seamless borders when it comes to retail, and in fact, there should be a neutralization of compliance requirements in each country for other retailers who want to come in from around the continent with different ranges and different products. So we have to be there. We have to be the guys who put up that wall and say, we're happy to play with you, but we want to know about standards and compliance standards, and we want our government to enforce those compliance standards. We don't want to have to be running around doing that work. And you've seen how it got out of hand with the spaza shops, and then how government retracted on the fact that they originally weren't enforcing and have now come in ostensibly to reinforce in that regard. So before I move on to the funding, let me come back to you, colleagues, and ask for your general opinion on whether or not you're thinking that we're actually heading down the right road in wanting to get this association moving. Thoughts?
Ivor, Stephen here.
Hi, Stephen.
Apologies, I was sitting in a Teams meeting before I realized we were on Zoom. It's a modern day problem. Just for the others, I'm with Yaku at LRB, just so that you know where I sit. I think this is essential. I mean, we've spoken about it a lot over the years. We're definitely seeing it coming at all angles, all stores. I do believe suppliers, manufacturers need to be involved or brought into line more, because ultimately, if they don't release their product, these guys won't have it to sell. Interesting dynamic where we call it paint and hardware. Would that include anything else sold in a store, for example, LPG and all those rogue traders, which actually have huge impacts on health and well-being of people around them. But in terms of support, we're keen.
Stephen, I
Thanks
think
for putting
Thank you for that. I think what's very interesting in terms of what you said is this: within the SAPHA structure, South African Patent and Hardware structure, what we would do is we would have different chambers. So we would we would very definitely have a chamber to do with coatings and another chamber to deal with hardware and associated products. And so the people represented on those chambers constituting the SAPA executive would in fact come from those two chambers. No question about that. We have to box very, very smartly in how we create this association from the get-go. Gary, I see you had your hand up.
Yes, Ivor. I'm not sure where this comes into play as well, but and I don't know about the rest of the retail groups, but who is dealing with the construction mafia? Because indirectly it has an impact on our stores. And I mean, if we're dealing with government organizations and regulatory bodies, who's going to be addressing the specific challenges that our retail stores face with the construction mafia?
In response to you, Gary, in response to your question, there is a task team under COGTA, which is the ministerial department responsible for coordination of all of the municipalities and all of the provincial governments. There is a task team under COGTA, which is specifically looking at that. However, we have no idea what they're doing. And we also want to impress upon them the impact that these mafias are having on our retail businesses. So the bottom line is we would summon COGTA to come to a meeting with SAPA, where we would in fact engage with them in a very creative and constructive way to make sure that we had a voice in those activities because of the pain that you guys currently are feeling. No question about that.
Okay.
Habdus, from your point of view, how do you feel about the discussion so far?
Yeah, as I said in the opening statement, I think we as a group will definitely support. As I said, I think it goes further than just paint. I think there are a whole bunch of industries that needs regulation of some sort. I mean, just I don't know, I look after cement for our group as well. I mean, that's just one industry that's also been heavily impacted over the last 4 to 5 years. I'm sure everybody knows how much cement we import as a country. So yeah, definitely on board to to support. Like you said earlier, if we set it up from the get-go and we set it up correctly, I think we're just setting ourselves up for success. But yeah, I can name a whole list of products which I believe that some sort of industry regulation in terms of what opposition and unregulated traders sell needs to be the focus point, because otherwise we're just going to keep on losing ground, and therefore the retail space, as you said earlier on, that is regulated, where we pay taxes and belonging to all sorts of governing bodies within our country, we will always be at a disadvantage.
Manny, from your perspective, sir?
Yeah, I don't think our opinions vary too much here. I think there's definitely consensus. I know it's an initial discussion, but the bigger picture or the broader strokes here is that some of us belong to a holding company, a bigger holding company like Massmart, for example, or Walmart. So we'd have to run some of this via our legal teams and our legal departments. I don't want to be seen as working autonomously to the structures in the business. Our business has always pushed for legislation and fair trade, and obviously, trading within the framework of South Africa, and what benefits South African retailers and South African citizens. Me personally, from my experience, I would definitely want to see a lot more legislation around illegal imports and legal inferior imports, if I can call it that. Obviously, I work very closely with Dulux, with Plascon, with Durham, etc., with Promac as well. So I'm happy to chat to some of the manufacturers on behalf of the forum. I'm very happy to. In fact, I'm seeing most of them next week in Joburg. So maybe sometimes from the customer point of view, which I am to these retail manufacturers, we might have a little bit more clout, if I can call it that, than yourselves. So yeah, happy to partner, but like I said, I'd need to dot some I's and cross some T's with our legal department before before I pursue anything further.
Thanks, Manny. And it's so good to hear from you that you volunteered the services of your entire legal department to help us structure the association. And in
No,
fact,
no, I didn't. I'm the Indian here, not you, Ace.
all right. Any further comments? Or should I just let me just carry on then?
Sorry,
Right.
Alva, before you carry on,
Yes, Dara.
just from Rowan's point of view, maybe he's got some input as well, Rowan.
Sorry, Ron, I didn't actually notice that you were on the line. How are you?
All good, thank you, guys. No, I'm happy. I mean, we don't fall into that sector, so far we haven't been affected by them. But it's always good to have legislation in place.
Fantastic. Good. So moving on then, colleagues. Obviously the question is, if we're going to do something like this, is there a cost implication? So let me say this to you. Now, the second bullet point, operational expenses of the Paint and Hardware Association are covered within SAPHA because of the fact that the majority of you are, in fact, all of you are members of SAPHA. So the operational expenses will be managed by the back office of SAPHA, and where necessary, we would utilize the option of YES, and I'm sure you all know YES, which is a great opportunity to reduce expenses in associations, but we would utilize the opportunity of YES to actually have SAPHA specific personnel within our operational structure. An annual fee would need to be agreed amongst ourselves to create a marketing fund and legal provision fund. Although initially I think we'll be able to do from a marketing point of view, below the line activities, which shouldn't cost us, and even from a legal point of view, below the line activities or a minimum of above the line provision for legal fees. And then obviously we'd be looking to partnerships and sponsorships from manufacturing and industry stakeholders, including, and this is the interesting thing, I don't know how many of you know, but in terms of triple BEE, there is a triple BEE charter in place for the media and communication sector. And in fact, marketing and advertising agencies earn some of their triple BEE points by investing their time in what is referred to as responsible marketing projects. In other words, it's like it's the same thing that the lawyers do. The lawyers have a set of activities for community upliftment, and that garners them scorecard points for triple BEE. Well, the advertising and media companies have precisely the same thing. Responsible marketing campaign is like, for argument's sake, don't drink and drive, use condoms, etc., etc., etc. Well, within our sector, the idea of lead in paint becomes a responsible marketing opportunity for advertising and marketing companies, methanol in paint, and importantly, guarantees on products, etc., etc. So we'd be looking to get marketing companies to actually join us as a responsible marketing project, which doesn't end up costing us, but which for them will earn them scorecard points. Let me stop at this stage. Manny, I see you do have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, man. There's a notice that your recording time is up. So I think you need to load some airtime there, mate.
Okay, it's certainly not our
Yeah.
recording time. We're fine
Yeah.
at recording time. Okay, thanks, Manny, but thank you for that. Right. So, colleagues, I suppose now the question is whether we can proceed so that by the 18th, or in fact within a short period of time after the 18th, we have an opportunity to put a constitution for the Paint and Hardware Association to yourselves, number one, to talk about provisioning in terms of who would sit on which subcommittees, and we wouldn't end up with a lot of subcommittees to start off with, and who from within your groups could be on some of those subcommittees. And again, when I use the term some, even though it's plural, we're not looking to create a bureaucratic structure here. And then importantly, to actually talk about the committees at BUSA that we think would be valuable for you to consider either nominating yourselves into or alternatively nominating people who work within your company into. So, colleagues, I suppose I'm asking, are there any objections to us proceeding with that set of activities?
No, I think I think we are at that point where we're saying let's proceed, and the detail will come out next, I guess.
Sure, fair enough. Good.
Agree.
Okay. Stephen, thank you for that. And what we'll do is we will make sure that certainly by the retail committee meeting date, or if necessary, in a separate meeting to the retail committee meeting while we are putting our act together in this forum, but that we move ahead as quickly as possible in establishing the association and in giving notice to BUSA of the fact that the association exists, to the Department of Labor, to the Department of Trade and Industry, and also to the Department of Health, so that they understand there is a player in the retail space willing to take accountability for standards which exist, and then willing to work with us for standards which may not currently exist but need to be developed in the process. And I suppose that's really it in terms of this discussion. The real test now is in the tasting. And so as we move ahead, Tara, are you comfortable with how we're proceeding here as the CEO of SAPHA?
Yes, I think it's, as Stephen mentioned and Jaco as well, that it's time to move forward. But I think what's more important is that we get hold of BUSA, which I will do today, to find out what other forums or committees are available specifically for retail and hardware as well. So I know that they've given us some generic ones which we currently sit on, but I think there might be more specific committees within BUSA and like that we need to be aware of as well.
Fantastic. And colleagues, so I think what's important here is that everything we do and all of the activity in those various forums, so for example, there may be a CEO's forum through the Chartered Institute of Management, whatever happens within those forums, we bring back to this forum, which in fact then is the SAPHA forum, so that we can share that information and make sure that we can strategize around policy implementation, but also on the ground implementation of what's required sooner rather than later. So all that's left for me to say is thank you all for joining me, for joining us. And I really do appreciate at such a short notice, so many of you making yourselves available. And I assure you, we will not abuse the opportunity the next time we need to do something like this. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Ivan.
Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Appreciate it. Thank you.